Hi, it's Roz, and I'm going to do a bit of a April roundup and plans for May. So wrap up and TBR in booktube jargon. And April's been quite a good reading month for me, contrary to my initial expectations. I've been missing my walk to work in lockdown because I normally read as I walk on the way to work, and that's like a nice half an hour of reading every morning, and then usually again on the way home. So that's 4 or 5 hours of reading I've lost each week, but I've managed to kind of build it back into other sort of spaces in my life, which is nice. And I've read some real goodies this month, as well as some kind of okay things. I read 2 new releases, Here We Are by Graham Swift and Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. Of the 2, I would warmly recommend Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, but I did a video about those 2 books and why I enjoyed one and was less enthused by the other, so I won't go on about them here. The other thing that I've read this month, which I've talked about kind of in detail already, was Told by Starlight in Chad by Joseph Brahim Said. And that was my, each month I try and read a book from a country where I've never read a book by an author from that country before, which is my long-winded way of explaining that. And that was my book for Chad, and that was interesting, not amazing, but interesting, but I've already talked about that. I had a good month for drama. Now, I didn't read any Greek drama this month, ancient Greek drama, which I've been sort of doing most of this year. The reason being is because I read 3 plays, all for discussing drama with Tilly, my daughter of Tilly's Shelf. And the reason we've been so keen this month is because during lockdown, the National Theatre are releasing for 1 week at a time, like successful productions from the last kind of decade, I suppose, some of their top hits, really good stuff. And we've been tying in some of our reading and talking about drama with those. So we read and then talked about One Man, Two Governors, which was a scream, and I really enjoyed, and I hope I prompted some people out there to watch it that wouldn't have done otherwise. Now that is by Richard Bean, but it's a modern updating of the play The Servant of Two Masters by Carlo Goldoni, 18th century Italian commedia dell'arte play. So I read that as well, which is, I have to say, something I would not have picked up and read if we hadn't been doing the sort of discussing drama series. And so that was a pleasurable experience, interesting. We also got a lovely chance to revisit an absolute favourite of mine and Tilly's, which is Twelfth Night. And there's videos about both of those, One Man, Two Governors and Twelfth Night, on Tilly's channel, so I'll link to them below and I won't witter on about them here. But what I will say is that if you were watching this video fairly promptly and not in a few months' time, when this will be irrelevant, please do look for what the National Theatre is putting on each week. The current week it's Frankenstein with Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee Miller, which is good, but I have to say I didn't think it was amazing. It wasn't. It didn't absolutely set me on fire, I have to say, but interesting and really interestingly staged, and an interesting kind of effort to pull a play out of a strange classic book. But next Thursday, so that's the 7th of May, I think that's right, is the new one that's released for a week is Antony and Cleopatra, Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra, and it just looks like a really excellent production, and do watch it, and then comment and talk about it with me. I may try and do another discussing drama little video for it as well, because interesting play, Antony and Cleopatra. Not my favourite Shakespeare, I have to say, but it's got some brilliant bits in it. So what else have I been up to this month? Well, earlier in the month I tried doing a bit of comfort reading, because everyone was saying you need to do comfort reading. Well, I was saying it too, it's like, oh, I can't concentrate, read something easy and enjoyable that'll make you happy. So I read a couple of P.G. Woodhouses, and that was two of his later ones, one from 1963 and one from 1971. I don't think I even realised he was writing Jeeves and Wooster books like that late, and almost right up to when he died. And they had all of the humour and the magic of those Jeeves and Wooster stories. But I have to say, if you haven't previously read any Jeeves and Wooster books by P.G. Woodhouse, maybe you've kind of heard of them, maybe you've seen the adaptations on telly, whatever. They are so worth reading. So they're so sort of, they just sparkle with wit and humour, and you know, it's a kind of a lost world of maybe did it even ever exist of valets and butlers and gentlemen's clubs and country houses, and you know, but you know, if like Downton Abbey is the sort of romanticised, you know, oh, isn't this all gorgeous? What Woodhouse does is kind of take the piss out of it in a brilliant way, very enjoyable. But read one of the earlier ones like Right Ho, Jeeves, or Code of the Woosters or something, rather than the two that I read. I just read those because I haven't read them previously, and there's not many that I haven't read before. So that was enjoyable. Another thing that I often turn to when I want sort of relaxing reading is sort of detective fiction, you know, and a good like murder thriller type thing. And so I read The Secret Place by Tana French, which is one of her Dublin Murder Squad books, and it's good. It's good, but it actually dragged a bit, which is not what you expect when reading a murder or a detective fiction book. She writes really well, so I'm not sure why it dragged. I obviously wasn't in the right mood, but there was one thing that I positively disliked about it, and which didn't spoil the book completely, but it took the edge off, which is that it had a little kind of supernatural element. Like it's brilliant. It was brilliant about teenage girls and sort of friendships and enemyships between teenage girls. But this little group, they had this kind of telekinesis thing going on, and there was things about seeing ghosts and so on. Now, the bits about seeing ghosts you could kind of put down to sort of group hysteria, because it's set in a school with boarders and day pupils, and you know, so that I could kind of go with. But no, it actually made out that the whole telekinesis thing was real. You know, they were really like getting objects to fly around or making light bulbs explode, and you know, that is not what I want in a detective thriller, because the whole point of those books is the kind of the whodunit, can you work it out? I don't know, they just have to be factual. They have to be, it doesn't make, like historical fiction, you can, I'm not wild about adding supernatural elements, but there was a kind of little supernaturally bit in Hamnet, and that's okay, I could deal with that. If you've read any Diane Setterfield, something like Once Upon a River, a bit of supernatural in that, yeah, that's fine. But detective fiction, no, it doesn't belong there. That's wrong. It takes the because you can explain anything if you can put it down to magic, and then what's the point of puzzling out, you know, who done it? Yeah, you know. Anyway, rant over. Better distraction for me was my non-fiction book of the month was I read Bedsit Disco Queen by Tracey Thorn, and Tracey Thorn was in. Basically, she's the same age as me, a couple of years older, and so this is her memoir about music she was listening to, and then setting up a band, first the Marine Girls and then Everything But the Girl, and she listened to the kind of music that I listened to, and then she became a band or two bands that I listened to. I loved Everything But the Girl when I was kind of, I associate it with when I was first a student, and it was like the soundtrack of that year or so for me. So weirdly escapist pleasure in going back to kind of like a period of my life through her life, and really enjoyed that. The other thing that I've found kind of good to read this month has been poetry, which would seem to be a surprise because it's not necessarily, you know, you think, oh, maybe I need something kind of easygoing because life, world, pandemic, but actually poetry's working for me at the moment. A little bit of breathing space from that. I read The Whore Lantern by Seamus Heaney, which is a fine little collection, and one that I happen not to have read. I've read quite a bit of Seamus Heaney, but not that one, so that was a pleasure. I did, at the end of the month, think, okay, we're back on track here. Let's pick up a couple of books that are more of an intellectual challenge, because I didn't want to let a whole month go by without reading something that kind of pushed me a bit. Hamnet is quite well, to use a really kind of one of those rubbish descriptions, it's kind of literary fiction, I guess. But it's nevertheless quite easy to read, I thought. Whereas, end of the month, the two things I read were a Clarice Lispector, The Passion According to G.H., from 1964. Now, I'm a Clarice Lispector fangirl. I've only discovered her in the last year. This is the third book of hers I've read. I think she's extraordinary and fascinating. So I read that, and I read my German book for Read German Books year that we're having, which was Malina by Ingeborg Bachmann. That was from 1971 that came out. And they were an interesting couple of books to read back to back, because they are both quite strange. And in fact, I think I will say no more about either of them, and I will jolly well make a video about those two books, and my experience of reading them and my response to them. Interesting books about women and women's consciousness, psychology. Yeah, so I jolly well should do that, so I will. So I shall say no more about those two. But that's kind of was the end of the month for me. In fact, I finished Malina just like a day into May.